In the early months of World War II, a strange kind of fear gripped the Atlantic. It didn't come from the skies. It didn't ride on tanks or fall from planes. It came from beneath the sea and hit without warning. Merchant ships would leave port under gray skies, engines rumbling, radios buzzing, and then vanish. No distress calls, no survivors, only oil slicks and floating wreckage. The men on those convoys knew the odds. Every journey was a gamble. At night, they'd scan the horizon for shadows that shouldn't be there. Some whispered of torpedoes that struck before radar could blink. Others swore they saw nothing at all, just calm seas, then fire. Crews started calling it the Black Silence. And at the center of it all was one man, Otto Kretschmer, a commander who made his name not with volume, but with absence. No loud orders, no wasted words, no mercy. They called him Silent Otto, not because he was shy, but because death followed wherever he went, and he never needed to raise his voice. Between 1939 and 1941, Kretschmer led a single submarine, U-99, on a campaign so deadly, it crippled Allied shipping routes. 47 ships, over 274,000 tons of steel, cargo, and men, all sent to the bottom with surgical precision. Allied forces scrambled, convoy strategies changed, but the damage had been done. A single U-boat had turned the Atlantic into a graveyard. Otto didn't hunt for glory. He didn't rant like other Nazi officers. He was calm, calculating, deliberate. His crew feared him, respected him, followed him. And his enemies? They never even saw him coming. This is the story of the ghost beneath the waves, the quiet killer of the Atlantic, the man who turned silence into a weapon. Britain had always depended on the sea. An island nation with no vast land borders to fall back on, it drew its strength from trade routes stretching across oceans. In 1939, with Europe unraveling, that lifeline became critical. Grain from Canada, oil from Texas, ammunition from factories in the American Midwest. Everything needed to survive and to resist came by ship. But the Atlantic was vast, cold, and merciless. And now, it was hunted. Germany knew it couldn't match the Royal Navy ship for ship, but it didn't need to. What it had instead was a weapon that didn't fight fair, the U-boat, short for Unterseeboot, undersea boat. They were small, cramped, and nearly invisible when submerged, but they were perfect tools for terror. At first, the Allies underestimated the threat. Convoys moved slowly, barely guarded, sailing predictable routes. The U-boats waited. Lurking in the shadows of the sea, they struck with torpedoes that exploded beneath a ship's keel, breaking its back in seconds. One blast, and the cold water did the rest. The sailors either drowned, burned, or froze before help could arrive. There was often no help at all. The early months of the Battle of the Atlantic were brutal. German U-boat commanders became national heroes. Some favored aggression, others finesse, but one would rise above them all, not just for the number of ships he sank, but for the way he did it. Otto Kretschmer wasn't the loudest. He didn't crave attention. While others posed for propaganda photos and spoke in flowery Nazi rhetoric, Otto stayed quiet. He let results speak. His methods were chilling in their efficiency. He didn't rely on luck or bravado. He relied on discipline, mathematics, and timing. And while the Atlantic raged with fire and steel, Silent Otto turned the ocean into a chessboard, and he rarely lost a piece. Otto Kretschmer was born on May 1, 1912, in the town of Heidenau, Germany. His father was a schoolteacher, stern and orderly, and Otto inherited both his discipline and his quiet resolve. As a child, he was reserved, often lost in thought. Not the type to shout or demand attention, but those who knew him remembered his focus, that intense stillness in his eyes when he was learning something new. At 18, he joined the Reichsmarine, the newly reorganized German Navy. It was still rebuilding from the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles. But for young Otto, it was a calling. He studied navigation, engineering, languages, anything that could give him an edge. While others partied in port cities, Kretschmer buried himself in books. He wasn't trying to impress. He was trying to prepare. His first assignments were on surface ships, including a stint as a naval attaché in the United Kingdom. He watched the British Navy closely, learned its patterns, and noted its weaknesses. Later, when the tides of war turned, these quiet observations would become weapons. But Otto didn't truly come alive until he transferred to the submarine division. It was there, in the pressure-cooked steel of a U-boat, that his calm demeanor became lethal. He didn't fear confinement. He didn't panic in silence. He thrived in it. He quickly rose through the ranks, earning command of his first submarine, U-23, by 1939. U-23 was small, not meant for long patrols, but Kretschmer made it count. In early 1940, he famously slipped into British coastal waters and sank several ships near the Scottish coastline. It was his testing ground, and he passed with distinction. Still, it wasn't enough. Otto wanted more range, more power, more precision. He got it with U-99, a Type 7 U-boat that would become his scalpel and his legacy. Silent Otto had found his blade, and the Atlantic was about to bleed. U-99 was not the largest submarine in the Kriegsmarine, nor the newest. But in the hands of Otto Kretschmer, it became one of the deadliest machines of war to ever stalk the seas. Sleek, reliable, and maneuverable, the Type 6 B-class was built for fast, aggressive attacks, and Otto wielded it like a surgeon with a scalpel. From the moment he stepped aboard, he imposed his way of doing things. Silence was not just a preference, it was law. No shouting, no unnecessary chatter. Orders were given in calm, precise tones. Every movement had purpose. Every routine, from torpedo drills to diving procedures, was drilled to perfection. The crew didn't need to be told what to do. They were expected to know. Otto believed in preparation over improvisation. Patrols were mapped in advance with mathematical precision, taking into account the moonlight, sea currents, enemy convoy schedules, even psychological pressure. He would lie in wait like a predator, invisible beneath the waves, then strike when the enemy least expected it. And unlike many of his peers, Kretschmer often attacked at night while surfaced, using the speed of U-99 to his advantage. His philosophy was simple: hit fast, hit hard, and vanish. He enforced a strict code of discipline, but his men respected him deeply. He knew each of them by name. He ate the same food, stood the same watch. He was not a distant officer barking orders from above. He was in the thick of it, shoulder to shoulder in the cramped hull, his hand always steady on the controls. The conditions inside U-99 were brutal. The air was thick with diesel fumes, sweat, and unspoken dread. Bunks were shared in shifts, showers were rare, fresh food spoiled within days. But under Otto, the boat ran like clockwork. He created an environment where fear had no place, only focus. And above all, He made his men believe they were invisible, that if they did everything right, they could disappear beneath the ocean and reappear only when it was time to strike. By the time Otto Kretschmer took U-99 on its first patrol, Allied shipping captains didn't know his name, but they were already feeling his presence. Silent, Otto had taken control of his weapon. Now, he would take control of the sea. Otto Kretschmer didn't just follow the Kriegsmarine playbook, he rewrote it. While other U-boat commanders relied on group tactics and lucky ambushes, Otto crafted a methodical strategy that made his attacks feel like clockwork. He studied the ocean like a chessboard, plotting every move with calculation and calm. His greatest weapon wasn't firepower, it was timing. Kretschmer's most feared tactic was his surface night attack. Conventional wisdom warned submarines to stay submerged, silent and blind. But Otto understood that on the surface, under the cover of darkness, a U-boat was faster, more agile, and far more deadly. At night, when most convoys believed they were safe, U-99 would rise quietly from the depths and glide into position. No periscope, no sonar, just a black silhouette moving like a shadow against the waves. Then came the strike. He fired his torpedoes from dangerously close range, sometimes less than 1,000 meters. Each shot was deliberate. He didn't waste ammunition, and he didn't panic. His preferred method was to disable multiple ships in quick succession, causing confusion, blocking rescue efforts, and creating chaos. Often, he would sink an escort first, isolating the freighters. Then, one by one, the merchant ships followed. His efficiency was terrifying. On one patrol in early 1941, U-99 sank 7 ships in a single night. 7. That kind of precision wasn't luck, it was mastery. But Otto's strategy wasn't just about where he positioned U-99, it was psychological. Allied sailors began to dread the night. They listened for the splash of a torpedo they couldn't hear. They watched the water even when it was calm, knowing it could erupt in flame without warning. Convoy captains started rerouting. Escorts became tighter, but even that couldn't stop him. Not yet. His kill tally rose with each patrol. 10 ships here, 8 ships there. He wasn't just sinking tonnage, he was bending the Allied supply system. He forced the British Admiralty to rethink their defenses. Radio chatter increased. Panic set in among merchant fleets. All because of one submarine. One man. Back in Germany, Otto Kretschmer's legend grew. Newspapers printed sanitized reports of his success. His photo began circulating in military circles. The Kriegsmarine leadership took note. Here was a man who not only delivered results, but did so with a level of professionalism they could parade. Hitler himself would soon recognize him. But Otto didn't celebrate. He remained quiet, serious, detached from the Nazi pomp. To his crew, he was more than a commander. He was a shield. They believed as long as he was in control, they would survive. He demanded perfection, and in return, he gave them purpose. No gambling, no recklessness, just the cold execution of duty. The Atlantic was vast, the war was chaotic, but Otto Kretschmer made every patrol feel like a blueprint. Every ton sunk was a message. The ocean is mine tonight, and so long as U-99 sailed beneath it, no ship was truly safe. War at sea is often told in numbers. Ships sunk, tons destroyed, convoys disrupted. But behind every figure lies a human face. A man freezing in an oil-slicked sea. A sailor listening for the whistle of a torpedo. A captain watching his vessel break in two before slipping beneath the waves. Otto Kretschmer was known for his precision, his control, his calm, but the devastation he left behind was anything but clean. When a torpedo struck a merchant ship, the impact was instant and catastrophic. The hull buckled, steam pipes burst, coal dust ignited. Men below deck were incinerated or drowned before they knew what hit them. Others clawed their way topside into chaos, lifeboats tangled in flames, decks tilting violently as cold Atlantic water rushed in. In the silence that followed, survivors floated in the dark, surrounded by wreckage and the cries of their crewmates. Sometimes they were rescued. Often, they weren't. Some of those men lived to tell what it was like to be on the receiving end of Silent Otto's precision. They didn't know his name at the time, but they felt his presence. One survivor from the SS Beaverburn, sunk by U-99, described it as being hunted by a ghost. No warning, no sound, just impact, and then water. And yet, even among his enemies, Kretschmer earned a grudging respect. He was ruthless, but not cruel. When possible, he surfaced after a sinking and offered directions, sometimes even medical aid. In rare cases, he helped survivors into lifeboats. He followed the outdated codes of naval warfare that many other U-boat commanders abandoned. To him, there was no honor in slaughtering helpless men. His goal was destruction of material, not murder. Among his own crew, Otto was admired, almost revered. He pushed them hard, demanded discipline, but he protected them with the same rigor. In the steel tube of U-99, there was no room for weakness. Every man had to be sharp. Lives depended on it. And yet, in that pressure, Otto forged one of the most loyal crews in the entire Kriegsmarine. But even loyalty has its limits. The men lived in fear, not just of depth charges and aircraft, but of the cold, the silence, the isolation. Weeks at sea without sunlight, rations growing stale, the reek of diesel clinging to every surface, and always, always, the knowledge that one mistake, one sound, one unlucky sonar ping could mean the end. For all his brilliance, Kretschmer could not insulate his men from the psychological toll of life beneath the waves. Nightmares were common. Mental fatigue grew. There were no chaplains on board, no counselors. Only orders, routines, and silence. Still, they followed him. They trusted that if anyone could bring them back home, it was Silent Otto. And for a long time, he did. Until the night when U-99 would rise for the last time. By early 1941, Otto Kretschmer had become a legend within the Kriegsmarine. He was no longer just a skilled U-boat commander. He was the commander. His results were unmatched. His methods were studied. His calm demeanor had become as iconic as the steel hull of U-99 itself. In Berlin, his name was spoken with admiration. In London, with fear. Between September 1939 and March 1941, Kretschmer carried out 8 combat patrols. During that time, he sank 47 ships, totaling 274,333 gross registered tons. No other U-boat commander in the war came close in efficiency. While some used brute force and wild aggression, Otto used patience, silence, and brutal precision. In August 1940, he reached a new peak. In a single patrol lasting just over 2 weeks, U-99 sank 11 merchant ships and damaged another. It was a staggering blow to Allied logistics. One of the most infamous attacks from that patrol came against convoy HX-65. Kretschmer maneuvered U-99 directly into the center of the convoy formation under the cover of night and struck repeatedly. Ships exploded and sank in fiery cascades. In the confusion, many believed they were under attack by multiple U-boats. It was only later they realized the truth. It had all been the work of one man. His success didn't go unnoticed. On August 26, 1940, he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with oak leaves and swords, one of the highest military honors in Nazi Germany. He received personal congratulations from Admiral Dönitz, the architect of the U-boat fleet, and even from Adolf Hitler himself. But Otto wasn't interested in the theater of war. He rarely gave interviews. He refused to exaggerate his achievements. Even when propaganda officers begged for heroism, Otto remained restrained. He knew the ocean didn't care for medals. His growing fame came with growing risk. The British Admiralty had begun to track patterns. They were deploying more destroyers with advanced sonar. Convoy escort tactics were improving. The Royal Navy now studied men like Kretschmer, learning from their methods to build counter-strategies. Still, U-99 kept winning. Even Kretschmer's rivals respected him. Other U-boat captains would ask for his tactical notes, analyzing how he managed to hit multiple ships without wasting a torpedo. His logbooks were studied like gospel. But to Otto, there was no secret, just discipline, training, and patience. The men aboard U-99 became like a family. They had survived things most sailors couldn't imagine: torpedo jams, sudden dives, close calls with depth charges. Through it all, Otto never flinched. He walked the narrow corridors of the boat like a surgeon moving through an operating room. Calm, steady, unshakable. But as his legend grew, so did the pressure. The Allies were adapting. The ocean was changing. Each patrol became harder. Each return home was less certain. And in March 1941, on what would be his final mission, Otto Kretschmer and U-99 sailed into a sea that no longer played by his rules. The predator was now being hunted. In March 1941, Otto Kretschmer and his crew set out aboard U-99 for what would become their final patrol. By now, the Atlantic had changed. Allied tactics had evolved. Convoys traveled with more destroyer escorts. Aircraft patrolled key lanes, and sonar technology, primitive but improving, made lurking beneath the waves a deadlier gamble than before. Still, Otto pressed forward. He had defied odds before. His patrol zone was just west of the British Isles, near the heavily trafficked convoy routes. He was hunting in shallower waters now, closer to the enemy, with more risk in every maneuver. But that didn't stop him. On March 16th, U-99 found its mark. Convoy HX-112. This convoy, however, was unlike those Otto had faced in earlier patrols. It was better protected, guarded by some of the Royal Navy's most skilled escort captains. Among them was Captain Donald McIntyre, commanding HMS Walker, and Lieutenant Commander James van der Velde on HMS Vanek, two men who had studied the U-boat threat obsessively. Under cover of night, Kretschmer moved in. U-99 fired several torpedoes, sinking two ships, the freighter SS Korsham and the tanker MV Harmatris. It was a clean, efficient strike, but the escorts were ready. The Royal Navy had learned to anticipate Kretschmer's movements. Almost immediately after the torpedoes hit, destroyers closed in on the estimated firing position. Using sonar pings and searchlights, They locked onto U-99's location and unleashed a wave of depth charges. The sea shook with violent explosions. Inside the submarine, men were thrown from their bunks, lights flickered, and pipes groaned. Water began to leak into the forward compartment. Kretschmer, ever calm, gave the order to dive deeper, hoping to slip beneath the British ships, but the destroyers adjusted. The net was tightening. For hours, U-99 was hunted, pushed down, boxed in, battered by concussive blasts. Batteries began to fail. Carbon dioxide levels rose. Otto knew they couldn't survive another wave. He surfaced. HMS Walker spotted the submarine as it broke through the surface. Kretschmer ordered the scuttling of U-99. He wasn't going to let it fall into enemy hands. Charges were set, hatches opened. Men scrambled onto the deck, waving improvised white flags into the night. It was the end of the line. Otto Kretschmer was captured, along with most of his surviving crew. HMS Walker's crew, recognizing the man they had been tracking for months, treated him with a strange mix of hostility and respect. Here was the ghost of the Atlantic, the man whose name had haunted their convoys, now standing calmly on their deck in a soaked uniform. In the early hours of March 17th, U-99 slipped beneath the waves for the last time, not with a bang, but with a quiet hiss, vanishing into the same silence it had once used as its weapon. Kretschmer was sent to England as a prisoner of war, interrogated, studied, then transferred to Canada, where he would spend the rest of the war behind barbed wire, far from the ocean he once ruled. His reign was over, but his legend had only just begun. For most men, capture meant obscurity. For Otto Kretschmer, it marked the beginning of an unexpected second life. After his surrender in March 1941, he was interrogated by British intelligence. They wanted to understand his methods, how one man had managed to cripple so many convoys, how his discipline turned a single submarine into a precision instrument of war. But Otto gave them little. He was cooperative, respectful, but careful. He had no interest in boasting or betraying the men he had served with. He was eventually transferred to Canada, to a sprawling prisoner of war camp far from the Atlantic. There, behind fences and under watch, he lived in quiet reflection. For the first time in years, Otto was forced to sit still. No patrols, no charts, no torpedoes to load. Just long days, long winters, and the sound of wind through pine trees instead of sonar pings. Other prisoners remembered him as calm and private. He didn't complain. He didn't brag. He taught English to younger sailors. He kept a small journal. And above all, he waited. When the war ended in 1945, Kretschmer was held for 2 more years before being released. He returned to a broken country, a divided Germany, where the old world was gone and the new one was still being built from rubble. But unlike many high-ranking officers, Otto had kept his distance from the political machinery of the Third Reich. He had never joined the Nazi Party. His record, while lethal, was professional, not ideological. That would prove crucial in the years to come. In 1955, a new German navy, the Bundesmarine, was formed as part of NATO's efforts to rebuild Western Europe's defenses. Kretschmer was invited to join. To the surprise of many, he accepted. For a man who had once hunted Allied ships, joining NATO seemed like a contradiction. But Otto saw it differently. The oceans were no longer a battlefield. The Cold War was rising, The threat was no longer Britain, it was the Soviet Union. And in this new conflict, experience mattered more than old loyalties. Kretschmer worked his way up through the ranks. He wasn't given easy assignments. He earned them. He served on NATO staff. He oversaw training. He shaped the very doctrines he had once defied. And in 1965, he was promoted to Flotilla Admiral, the highest-ranking former U-boat commander in the post-war Navy. He never spoke much about his wartime patrols. When asked, he gave brief answers, or none at all. He refused to romanticize what he had done, and he never excused it either. The sea, he believed, had no memory. But the men who survived, those he served with, and those he fought against, they remembered everything. Otto Kretschmer retired in 1970. He spent his later years in Bavaria, living quietly, as he always had. In 1998, while on a holiday cruise near the coast of Gibraltar, he suffered a fall and died shortly after. He was 86. The Atlantic had taken many lives. Otto's wasn't among them, but his legacy, like the wrecks of the ships he sank, remained just beneath the surface, still, silent, and never quite forgotten.